The dusty platform was empty except for her trunks, and the sound of the departing train fading into the distance, leaving Sophia Greene standing alone in Benton, Arkansas, with nothing but a crumpled telegram in her trembling hand, and the devastating realization that her fiancé had never intended to meet her at all. She stared at the words again, though they had already burned themselves into her memory. "Changed my mind. Do not come. Returning deposit." The telegram had arrived that morning in Little Rock, but by then she was already halfway to Benton, her ticket purchased, her belongings packed, her old life abandoned. She had sold nearly everything she owned in Philadelphia to make this journey west, convinced that Thomas was waiting with open arms and a future full of promise. Instead, she stood on a train platform in a town she had never heard of until 3 weeks ago, with $47 to her name and nowhere to go. The August heat pressed down on her like a physical weight, making her heavy traveling dress feel like a wool blanket. Sweat gathered at her temples and trickled down her spine. She had imagined Arkansas would be cooler somehow, more forgiving than the Philadelphia summer she had left behind, but the sun here seemed angrier, more personal in its assault. The platform shimmered with heat waves, and the few buildings she could see from where she stood looked weathered and tired, as though even the structures themselves were exhausted by the relentless climate. Sophia picked up the smallest of her 3 trunks and tried to drag it toward the station house, but the weight and her own weakness made it impossible. She had eaten little on the train, too nervous about her arrival to stomach more than bread and water. Now her arms shook with the effort of moving even the lightest piece of luggage. She set it down again and pressed her hands to her face, fighting the urge to cry. Crying would not help. Crying would only make her look more pathetic to anyone who might pass by. "Madam, you need some help there." The voice startled her so badly she nearly dropped her reticule. She turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands, his expression concerned but not intrusive. He was tall, with sun-darkened skin and hair the color of wheat at harvest time. His clothes were practical, working clothes, worn but clean, and his boots showed the kind of use that came from hours in the saddle. Everything about him spoke of the West, of this place that was so foreign to her. "I apologize. I did not mean to startle you," he said, taking a small step back as if to prove he meant no harm. "I was picking up some supplies from the freight office and saw you standing here. Are you waiting for someone?" Sophia considered lying, but what would be the point? The truth was written all over her situation, in her trunks and her traveling clothes and the lost expression she knew she must be wearing. "No," she said quietly. "No one is coming." The man's eyes flickered with understanding and something that might have been sympathy. He glanced at her luggage, then back at her face. "You have family in town, friends?" "I do not know anyone in Benton," she admitted, and saying it out loud made it feel even more real, even more frightening. "I was supposed to meet someone, but the arrangement fell through." She did not elaborate, and to her relief, the man did not press. Instead, he looked up at the sun, then back at the platform. "Well, you cannot stay here. Station closes in about an hour, and there is not a hotel in town that is fit for a lady traveling alone." He seemed to be thinking, weighing options in his mind. "My ranch is about 5 miles north of here. It is not much, but it is respectable. My foreman and his wife live on the property, and there is a spare room in the main house. You would be safe there while you figure out what to do next." Sophia stared at him, trying to determine if this was genuine kindness or something more dangerous. She had been warned about trusting strangers, especially men in unfamiliar places, but what choice did she have? She could not sleep on a train platform, and if the hotels were as unsuitable as he suggested, she had few options. There was something in his face, though, an openness and honesty that made her want to trust him. "I do not want to impose," she said slowly, "and I do not even know your name." "Graham Quinn," he said, extending his hand. "I run a cattle ranch north of town. Been there about 6 years now. As for imposing, well, it would be more of an imposition to my conscience if I left you here." She took his hand briefly, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip that was carefully tempered. "Sophia Greene. And if you are certain it would not be too much trouble, I would be grateful for somewhere to stay tonight. Just tonight until I can make other arrangements." Graham nodded and replaced his hat on his head. "Let me get these trunks loaded onto my wagon. I have to pick up a few more things and then we can head out." He lifted the largest trunk as if it weighed nothing, and Sophia watched as he carried it across the platform to a wagon hitched near the freight office. He made 2 more trips for the other pieces, and she followed with her reticule clutched tightly in both hands. The wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, the horse standing patiently in its traces. Graham helped her onto the bench seat, then disappeared into the freight office and returned a few minutes later with several wrapped packages and a large sack of something that might have been flour or grain. He secured everything in the back, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they pulled away from the station, Sophia took her first real look at Benton. It was smaller than she had expected, just a handful of streets with wooden buildings that looked like they had been built quickly and without much thought to aesthetics. There was a general store, a bank, a saloon, a church with a modest steeple, and a few other structures she could not identify. People moved along the boardwalks with purpose, most of them dressed in practical clothing suited to the heat and the work of frontier life. A few glanced at the wagon as it passed, their eyes curious but not unfriendly. "It is not Philadelphia," Graham said, as if reading her thoughts. "But it is growing. 10 years ago there was nothing here but a trading post and a lot of hope." "How did you know I was from Philadelphia?" Sophia asked, surprised. He smiled slightly. "Your dress, your speech, the way you carry yourself." "You are from back east, and Philadelphia seemed like a good guess." "Was I right?" "You were," she admitted. "I have lived there my whole life. I have never been west of Pennsylvania until this week." "What made you come all this way?" Graham asked, then immediately shook his head. "I apologize, that is not my business. You do not have to answer." But Sophia found herself wanting to talk, needing to put words to the disaster of the past few days. "I was engaged to be married. My fiancé moved to Arkansas last year to establish himself in business. He wrote to me regularly, told me about the opportunities here, the life we would build together. 2 months ago he sent money for a train ticket and asked me to come. So I sold my furniture, said goodbye to my friends, and boarded a train." She paused, the words catching in her throat. "This morning, while I was changing trains in Little Rock, I received a telegram. He changed his mind. He does not want to marry me after all." Graham was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the reins. "I am sorry," he said finally. "That is a hard thing, to have your future pulled out from under you like that." "The worst part is that I feel so foolish," Sophia said, surprised by her own honesty. "I should have known better. I should have insisted on waiting until he came back to Philadelphia, or at least until he sent for me properly. But I was so eager to start our life together, so convinced that everything would be perfect." "You trusted someone you loved," Graham said. "That is not foolish. That is just being human. He is the one who should feel ashamed, not you." They rode in silence for a while, leaving the town behind and following a dusty road that cut through rolling hills covered in tall grass and scattered trees. The landscape was different from anything Sophia had known in Pennsylvania, more open and wild, with a sense of endless space that was both exhilarating and slightly terrifying. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing, their forms dark against the golden grass. "Those are yours?" she asked, gesturing toward the herd. "Some of them," Graham replied. "I run about 300 head, though the numbers change depending on the season and how many I sell. It is a good living, better than I expected when I first came out here." "Where are you from originally?" "Missouri." "My family had a small farm near Kansas City, but after my parents passed, I decided to try something different. I had always wanted more land, more space, and Arkansas offered that. I bought the ranch from a man who was heading to California, fixed it up, and made it work." "Do you have other family, siblings?" "A sister in St. Louis. She is married with 4 children. I visit when I can, but it has been about 2 years since I made the trip." He glanced at her. "What about you? Will your family worry when they do not hear from you?" Sophia shook her head. "My parents are both gone. I have a brother in Boston, but we are not close. We exchange letters at Christmas, and that is about the extent of it. I suppose I should write and tell him about the change in circumstances, but I am not looking forward to explaining that my engagement ended before I even arrived." The road curved around a stand of oak trees, and then the ranch came into view. It was more substantial than Sophia had expected, with a 2-story house painted white with dark green shutters, a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, and a network of corrals and fences that spoke of careful planning and hard work. Gardens grew on either side of the house, and she could see chickens pecking in a yard near what looked like a bunkhouse. Everything was neat and well-maintained, the kind of place that showed pride in ownership. Graham drove the wagon up to the front of the house and set the brake. Before he could move to help her down, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. She was middle-aged, with graying brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, and a weathered face that broke into a warm smile when she saw Graham. "Mr. Quinn, I was not expecting you back until tomorrow," she said, then noticed Sophia and her expression shifted to curiosity. "Oh, you have a guest." "This is Miss Sophia Greene," Graham said, coming around to help Sophia down from the wagon. "She found herself in a difficult situation in town, and I offered her a place to stay for the night. Miss Greene, this is Alina Walsh. She and her husband Patrick manage the ranch with me." Alina's eyes were sharp and assessing, but not unkind. "A difficult situation," she repeated, and Sophia could see her putting the pieces together, the traveling clothes, the trunks, the lack of an escort. "Well, any friend of Mr. Quinn's is welcome here. Come inside, dear. You look exhausted and half-starved." Sophia wanted to protest that she was fine, but the truth was she felt ready to collapse. The heat, the shock, the emotional upheaval of the day had all caught up with her at once. She let Alina guide her into the house while Graham began unloading the wagon. The interior of the house was cool and surprisingly refined, with polished wood floors, simple but well-made furniture, and curtains that let in light while keeping out the worst of the heat. Alina led her through a sitting room and up a narrow staircase to a small bedroom that overlooked the front yard. It had a single bed with a colorful quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, and a window that was open to catch any available breeze. "It is not fancy, but it is clean and comfortable," Alina said. "I will have Mr. Quinn bring up your trunks in a bit. For now, why do not you wash up and rest? I will prepare some supper and we can talk more later." "Thank you," Sophia said, her voice breaking slightly. "I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this kindness." Alina patted her hand. "We have all needed help at one time or another, dear. That is what decent people do for each other. Now rest, and do not worry about anything for the moment." After Alina left, Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. It was not the dramatic, hysterical weeping she had feared, but rather a quiet, exhausted release of all the tension and fear she had been holding. She cried for her broken engagement, for her naivety, for the future she had imagined that would never come to pass. But she also cried with a strange sense of relief, as if arriving at this unexpected place had somehow lifted a burden she had not known she was carrying. When the tears finally stopped, she washed her face with water from the pitcher and changed out of her traveling dress into something lighter and more practical. Her trunks had been brought up while she was crying, set quietly inside the door by someone who had been thoughtful enough not to disturb her. She unpacked a few necessities, then lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a moment before going back downstairs. She woke to the sound of voices and the smell of cooking food. The light coming through the window was softer now, the harsh afternoon sun giving way to early evening. Sophia rose and checked her appearance in the small mirror above the washstand, trying to smooth her hair and make herself presentable. She felt better, the sleep having restored some of her equilibrium. Downstairs, she found the kitchen at the back of the house, a large warm room with a cookstove, a long wooden table, and shelves lined with dishes and preserves. Alina was stirring something in a pot while Graham sat at the table reading a newspaper. Another man, older and weathered, sat across from him nursing a cup of coffee. Graham looked up when she entered and immediately stood. "Miss Greene, I hope you were able to rest." "I was, thank you," Sophia said. "I apologize for falling asleep. I did not mean to be rude." "Nonsense," Alina said firmly. "You needed the sleep. Come sit down, supper is almost ready." The older man also stood, removing his hat. "Patrick Walsh, Miss Greene, pleased to meet you." "Pleased to meet you as well," Sophia replied, taking a seat at the table. Patrick had the look of a man who had spent his entire life working outdoors, his face deeply lined and his hands gnarled from years of hard labor. But his eyes were kind, and his handshake was gentle despite the obvious strength in his grip. The meal was simple but delicious, beef stew with vegetables and fresh bread that Alina had baked that morning. There was also butter and jam, and strong black coffee that Sophia normally would have found too bitter, but which tasted perfect after the day she had endured. The conversation flowed easily, with Patrick and Alina asking polite questions about her journey, and Graham filling in the occasional detail about how they had met at the train station. Sophia found herself relaxing in their company, their easy familiarity and lack of judgment making her feel less like an intruder and more like a welcome guest. Alina was particularly good at drawing her out, asking about Philadelphia and what life was like in a big city. Patrick seemed content to listen, occasionally offering a comment or a dry observation that made everyone laugh. After supper, Alina shooed the men out of the kitchen while she and Sophia cleaned up. "They will just get in the way," she said with affection. "Besides, it will give us a chance to talk." As they washed and dried the dishes, Alina said carefully, "Mr. Quinn told us a little about what happened, just that your engagement ended unexpectedly, and you found yourself stranded. I do not mean to pry, but do you have a plan for what comes next?" Sophia had been trying not to think about that question, but she knew she could not avoid it forever. "I have some money," she said slowly. "Enough to buy a train ticket back east if that is what I decide to do. But I do not know where I would go. I sold my apartment and most of my belongings. I suppose I could stay with my brother in Boston, but the idea of showing up on his doorstep as a failure is not appealing." "You are not a failure," Alina said firmly. "You took a risk on love and it did not work out. That takes courage, even if it did not end the way you hoped." "I feel like a fool, though," Sophia admitted. Everyone warned me about Thomas, said he was too charming, too smooth, but I did not want to listen. Alina was quiet for a moment, then said, "When I was 20, I was engaged to a man in Ohio. He was handsome and exciting, and I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. 3 weeks before the wedding, he ran off with my best friend." She smiled at Sophia's shocked expression. "It felt like the end of the world at the time. I thought I would never trust anyone again, never be happy again. But then I met Patrick, and I realized that the right person makes all the difference. Sometimes we have to go through the wrong ones to find them." "How did you meet Patrick?" Sophia asked. "He was working on my father's farm. He was older than me, quiet, not the kind of man who turned heads. But he was steady and kind, and he saw me, really saw me, in a way my fiancé never had. We have been married 32 years now, and I cannot imagine my life with anyone else." They finished the dishes in companionable silence, and then Alina walked Sophia back to her room. "You do not have to decide anything tonight," she said gently. "Take some time, rest, and let yourself heal a bit. Mr. Quinn will not rush you, I promise." Sophia slept better that night than she had in weeks, lulled by the quiet sounds of the countryside and the sense of safety that came from being in a place where people cared about her well-being. When she woke, early morning light was just beginning to filter through the curtains, painting the room in soft shades of gold and amber. She dressed and went downstairs to find the house already stirring. Graham was in the kitchen, pouring himself coffee from a pot on the stove. He smiled when he saw her. "Good morning. Help yourself to coffee. Alina usually makes breakfast around 7, but there is bread and butter if you are hungry now." "Coffee is fine," Sophia said, accepting the cup he handed her. "Thank you again for letting me stay." "I know this was not what you planned when you went into town yesterday." "Plans change," Graham said simply. "Besides, it is nice to have company. It gets quiet out here sometimes." He hesitated, then said, "I was thinking, if you are not in a rush to leave, you might want to stay a few more days. Give yourself time to figure out what you want to do next. There is no pressure, but the offer stands." Sophia considered this. The truth was, she had no idea what she wanted to do. The thought of getting back on a train and returning east filled her with dread, but staying in Arkansas felt equally impossible. She did not belong here, knew nothing about this kind of life. And yet, there was something appealing about the idea of having a few days to breathe and think without the pressure of making an immediate decision. "Are you certain it would not be an imposition?" she asked. "I am certain," Graham said. "Alina enjoys having another woman around, and honestly, you would be doing us a favor. She has been after me to hire someone to help organize the household accounts and correspondence. I am terrible at paperwork, always putting it off until it piles up. If you wanted to make yourself useful, you could help with that." It was a tactful way of offering her work without making it seem like charity, and Sophia appreciated the thoughtfulness. "I could do that," she said. "I helped manage the books for my father's shop before he died. I am fairly good with numbers and organization." "Then it is settled," Graham said, looking pleased. "You will stay for a while, help with the office work, and take your time deciding what comes next." Over the following days, Sophia fell into a routine at the ranch. Mornings were spent working in Graham's office, a small room off the sitting room that was indeed buried under piles of papers, ledgers, and correspondence. She sorted through everything methodically, organizing records, reconciling accounts, and drafting responses to letters that had been sitting unanswered for months. It was satisfying work, bringing order to chaos, and it gave her a sense of purpose that she badly needed. In the afternoons, she helped Alina with household tasks or simply sat on the porch and watched the ranch operate. There was always something happening: ranch hands moving cattle from one pasture to another, horses being trained in the corral, repairs being made to buildings and fences. Graham was everywhere at once, it seemed, working alongside his men, making decisions, solving problems. He had taken off his shirt one particularly hot afternoon, and Sophia had found herself staring at the play of muscles across his back and shoulders as he hammered posts into the ground. She had looked away quickly, embarrassed by her own reaction. She was beginning to notice other things about him too. The way he always made sure everyone had eaten before he sat down to his own meal. The gentleness he showed with the horses, talking to them in a low, soothing voice as he worked. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and how that smile seemed to come more easily when she was around. They talked often, usually in the evenings after supper when the day's work was done, and everyone gathered on the porch to catch the cooler air. Graham told her about his plans for the ranch, his hopes of expanding the herd and maybe breeding horses as a sideline. She told him about Philadelphia, about working in her father's shop, and the satisfaction she had found in helping customers find exactly what they needed. He asked questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just being polite, and she found herself opening up in ways she had not expected. One evening, about a week after her arrival, they were sitting together on the porch steps while Patrick and Alina had retired to their own cottage. The sky was magnificent, streaked with orange and purple as the sun set behind the distant hills. Sophia had never seen anything quite like the sunsets here, the way the whole world seemed to catch fire for a few precious minutes before darkness fell. "You miss Philadelphia?" Graham asked quietly. Sophia thought about it. "I miss certain things. The convenience of having shops close by, the museums and libraries, the sense of being connected to the wider world, but I do not miss it as much as I thought I would. There is something about this place that feels right, even though it is so different from everything I have known." "What feels right about it?" he asked, turning to look at her. She struggled to put it into words. "The simplicity, I suppose. The sense that what you do matters in a direct, tangible way. In the city, I always felt like I was just one small part of a vast machine. Here, I can see the results of my work. I can watch the ranch function more smoothly because I organize the accounts or enjoy a meal that I helped prepare. It feels more real somehow." Graham nodded slowly. "I know what you mean. That is part of why I left Missouri. I wanted to build something that was mine, something I could see and touch and be proud of. The ranch gives me that." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. Then Graham said, "You could stay, you know, not just for a few more days, but longer, as long as you wanted." Sophia's heart began to beat faster. "What do you mean?" "I mean you have made this place better in the short time you have been here. The office is organized for the first time since I bought the ranch. Alina is happier having another woman around, and I enjoy your company." He paused, then added quietly, "I enjoy it very much." "Graham, I cannot just stay indefinitely," Sophia said, even though part of her wanted to say yes immediately. "I do not have a position here, not really, and people would talk." "Then marry me," Graham said, the words coming out in a rush as if he had been holding them back and they had finally broken free. "I know it is fast, and I know you barely know me, but I think we could be happy together, Sophia. I think we could build something good." Sophia stared at him, her mind reeling. She had known him for barely more than a week. This was madness, the same kind of impulsive decision that had brought her to Arkansas in the first place. And yet, even as she thought this, she knew it was different. Thomas had been charming and exciting, full of grand promises and romantic gestures. Graham was steady and honest, offering her something real and solid and true. I do not want you to answer now, Graham said quickly, seeing her hesitation. Take time, think about it. I just wanted you to know that the option is there if you want it. Why me? Sophia asked. You could marry anyone. There must be women in Benton who would be happy to be your wife. Graham smiled slightly. I am sure there are, but I do not want to marry them. I want to marry you. From the moment I saw you standing on that platform, looking lost and brave at the same time, I felt something shift inside me. And every day since then has only confirmed what I already knew. You are strong and smart and kind. You are not afraid of hard work. You fit here, Sophia, whether you realize it yet or not. She did not answer that night, too overwhelmed by emotion and confusion to think clearly. But as she lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the night, she let herself imagine what it would be like to stay. To make this ranch her home, to work alongside Graham building a life together, to belong somewhere in a way she never had in Philadelphia. The next morning, she woke with a sense of clarity she had been missing. She found Graham in the barn, checking on a horse that had thrown a shoe the day before. He looked up when she entered, his expression guarded, as if he was afraid of what she might say. I need more time, Sophia said before he could speak. Not to decide if I want to marry you, because I think I already know the answer to that. But to be sure, I am making this decision for the right reasons. I do not want to rush into something because I am scared or because I do not have anywhere else to go. I want to choose you because you are what I want, not because you are convenient. Graham nodded, understanding in his eyes. Take all the time you need, and for what it is worth, I want you to choose me for the right reasons too. I want a wife who wants to be here, not one who feels trapped or obligated. Sophia stayed at the ranch through August and into September, the days blending together in a pattern of work and conversation and growing affection. She continued organizing the office, eventually taking over all the ranch's administrative tasks. She helped Alina with the garden and learned to cook dishes she had never attempted in her city apartment. She learned to ride, tentatively at first and then with growing confidence, until she could accompany Graham on his rounds of the property. The more time she spent with him, the more certain she became. Graham was everything Thomas had not been: honest, reliable, patient. He never made promises he could not keep, never exaggerated or embellished. What you saw was what you got, and what Sophia saw was a man of integrity and warmth, someone who would stand by her through whatever challenges life brought. They talked about everything during those weeks. Their childhoods, their fears, their dreams for the future. Graham told her about the loneliness of the past few years, how building the ranch had consumed all his energy and left little room for personal connections. Sophia told him about her parents, about her father's slow decline after her mother's death, about the isolation she had felt even in the crowded streets of Philadelphia. They also talked about practical matters. What their life together would look like, how they would share responsibilities, what they both wanted from marriage. Graham made it clear that he saw her as an equal partner, not just someone to manage his household. He valued her mind and her skills, wanted her input on decisions about the ranch. Sophia found this attitude refreshing and attractive, so different from Thomas's expectation that she would simply defer to his judgment in all things. One crisp September morning, when the heat of summer had finally broken and the air carried a hint of autumn, Sophia found Graham working in the corral with a young horse. She leaned against the fence and watched him work, patient and firm, guiding the animal through its paces with quiet confidence. When he noticed her, he led the horse over and smiled. "Have you been thinking?" he asked. "I've been thinking about almost nothing else," Sophia admitted, "and I have an answer if you still want to hear it. Graham's expression became serious. "I do." "Yes," Sophia said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Graham Quinn. Not because I am stranded or scared or grateful, but because I want to build a life with you, because I think we can be happy together, because I am falling in love with you." The joy that spread across Graham's face was worth every moment of uncertainty and doubt. He came around the fence and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding, matching the rapid beat of her own. "I love you too," he said into her hair. "I have loved you almost from the beginning, even though I knew it was crazy. Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Benton, with Alina and Patrick standing as witnesses and most of the town in attendance. It was a simple ceremony, nothing like the elaborate wedding Sophia had planned with Thomas, but it was perfect in its honesty and joy. She wore a dress that Alina had helped her sew, pale blue cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Graham wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes never leaving her face as they exchanged vows. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food contributed by neighbors who had heard about the wedding and wanted to celebrate. There was music and dancing, the fiddler playing lively tunes that got everyone on their feet. Sophia danced with Graham, with Patrick, with several of the ranch hands and townspeople who wanted to welcome her properly to the community. She felt embraced by it all, accepted in a way she had never quite felt in Philadelphia, where she had lived her entire life. As evening fell and guests began to depart, Graham took her hand and led her away from the festivities, walking toward the house in the gathering darkness. Inside, he had prepared the bedroom, filling it with candles that cast a warm, flickering light. Sophia felt her nervousness return, but it was mixed with anticipation and desire. "Are you happy?" Graham asked, cupping her face in his hands. "I am very happy," Sophia said truthfully. "Happier than I have ever been." He kissed her then, gently at first and then with growing passion. She responded with equal fervor, all the attraction and affection that had been building between them finally finding expression. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies, taking time to explore and discover. Graham was tender and patient, making sure she felt pleasure and comfort, and Sophia found herself responding with an abandon she had not known she possessed. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, talking quietly in the candlelight. "I cannot believe that a month ago I was standing alone on a train platform thinking my life was over," Sophia said. "And now I am here, married to you, starting a completely different future than the one I imagined." "Do you regret it?" Graham asked. "Any of it?" "Not for a moment," Sophia said firmly. "I regret the pain that brought me here, but I do not regret being here. This feels like where I was always supposed to be." The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Sophia had to learn an entirely new way of life, adapting to the rhythms of ranch work and the isolation that came with living miles from town. There were days when she missed the conveniences of city life, the ability to walk to a store or visit a library on a whim. But there were far more days when she felt grateful for the trade, for the beauty of the landscape, and the satisfaction of building something with her own hands. She took over complete management of the ranch's business affairs, discovering that she had a talent for negotiation and planning. Under her guidance, the ranch became more profitable, with better contracts for cattle sales and more efficient systems for purchasing supplies. Graham deferred to her judgment on these matters, trusting her instincts and appreciating the weight it took off his shoulders. They also began making improvements to the ranch itself. They expanded the barn, built a new bunkhouse for the hands, and added a proper office building where Sophia could work without being disturbed. They planted more trees around the house and enlarged the gardens. Slowly, the ranch transformed from a purely functional space into a home that reflected both their personalities and priorities. In the spring, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with both joy and terror. She had never been around babies much, knew little about pregnancy or childbirth beyond the basic facts. But Alina was a wealth of knowledge and experience, guiding her through the changes in her body and preparing her for what was to come. Graham was almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing anything remotely strenuous. Sophia had to firmly remind him that she was pregnant, not ill, and that she had no intention of spending 6 months sitting idle. They compromised, with her taking on lighter tasks but remaining active and engaged in the ranch's operations. Their son was born on a cold December night, with Alina serving as midwife and Graham pacing holes in the floor downstairs. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Sophia wondered if she had the strength to continue. But Alina talked her through it, coached her breathing, and when the baby finally emerged, crying lustily, Sophia felt a surge of love so intense it brought tears to her eyes. They named him George, after Graham's father. He was a healthy, vigorous baby with a shock of dark hair and lungs that could wake the entire household. Graham was besotted from the first moment, holding his son with a mixture of awe and terror, as if he could not quite believe this perfect creature was real. "We made this," he said wonderingly, looking from the baby to Sophia. "We made a whole person." "We did," Sophia agreed, exhausted but happy. "And he is perfect." George's arrival changed the household dynamic in ways both expected and surprising. The ranch hands, most of whom were young, single men, were surprisingly good with the baby, taking turns entertaining him and making silly faces to elicit smiles. Patrick carved a set of wooden toys, and Alina knitted enough blankets and clothes to last through several winters. As George grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. They added more land, increasing the herd and diversifying into horse breeding as Graham had once hoped to do. Sophia's business acumen proved invaluable, helping them navigate economic downturns and capitalize on opportunities. They became one of the most successful ranches in the region, known for quality livestock and fair dealing. When George was 3, Sophia became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah, was born in early autumn. She was smaller and quieter than George had been, with Graham's wheat-colored hair and Sophia's dark eyes. George was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Graham had to be reminded to give the children some space to breathe. The years passed in a blur of work and family and growth. George and Sarah grew into strong, confident children who could ride almost before they could walk. They attended the small school in Benton, making friends with other ranch children, and learning the 3 articles from a patient teacher who had come west from Ohio. Sophia made sure they also had books at home, reading to them every evening and encouraging their curiosity about the wider world. When George was 8 and Sarah 5, Sophia convinced Graham that they should take a trip. Not back east, but to San Antonio, where there was a proper city with museums and theaters and all the cultural amenities she sometimes missed. They made the journey by train, the children wide-eyed at everything they saw, and spent 2 weeks exploring. It was wonderful to experience city life again, but Sophia found herself eager to return home long before the visit was over. The ranch had truly become her place, the spot on earth where she most wanted to be. They had 2 more children over the following years. Another son, Samuel, born when Sophia was 32, and finally a daughter, Stella, who arrived when Sophia was 35 and made them swear she would be the last. 4 children felt like plenty, and Graham agreed, content with the family they had built. The ranch continued to grow and evolve. George showed a natural talent for working with horses and took over that aspect of the operation as he grew older. Sarah was more interested in the business side, often sitting with Sophia as she worked and asking endless questions about contracts and markets. Samuel seemed destined to be a scholar, always with his nose in a book, and they began making plans to send him to college in Little Rock. Stella, the baby, was fearless and wild, climbing everything and giving them all heart attacks on a regular basis. Through it all, Sophia and Graham's love deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, certainly, times when the stress of running a ranch and raising children made them short-tempered with each other. But they had learned to talk through problems, to listen to each other's perspectives, and to remember that they were partners in every sense of the word. On their 10th anniversary, Graham took Sophia back to Benton, to the train station where they had first met. It looked different now, newer and more prosperous, but it was still recognizably the same place. They stood on the platform where she had waited, abandoned and alone so long ago. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not been there that day?" Graham asked, his arm around her waist. "I try not to," Sophia admitted. "It frightens me to think about it, how easily my life could have gone a completely different direction. But I also think maybe we were meant to find each other. Maybe everything that happened with Thomas, as painful as it was necessary to bring me here." "I will always be grateful he was a fool," Graham said, "because his loss was my gain." They kissed on the platform, and Sophia felt the same rush of joy and rightness that she had felt on their wedding day. This man, this life, this family they had built together, it was everything she had never known she wanted. The years continued to roll forward, bringing new challenges and joys. George married at 22, bringing home a bright, capable woman named Martha who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the edge of the ranch property and began their own family, making Sophia and Graham grandparents. Sarah announced her intention to attend college, shocking everyone but ultimately winning their support. She went to study business and returned with ideas for modernizing the ranch's operations that proved invaluable. Samuel did indeed become a scholar, eventually teaching history at a school in Little Rock, but returning home every summer to help with the ranch and reconnect with his family. Stella married a neighboring rancher and settled nearby, close enough to visit regularly but independent enough to forge her own path. As Sophia and Graham grew older, they gradually handed over more of the ranch's daily operations to George and Martha, though they remained actively involved in major decisions. They spent their time working in the gardens Sophia had expanded over the years, riding through the property they knew like the backs of their hands, and playing with their growing number of grandchildren. On a warm spring evening when Sophia was 62 and Graham 65, they sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and thriving, populated by 3 generations of their family. In the distance, they could hear children's laughter and the sound of cattle lowing in the fields. "You brought me here and said welcome home," Sophia said softly, remembering that first day so many years ago. "I did not understand then what you meant. I did not know this place, did not know you. But you were right. This is home. This has always been home." Graham took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. "And you made it a home worth having. Everything good in my life started the day I found you on that train platform." "We found each other," Sophia corrected. And everything good in my life started when I took a chance on a cowboy who offered kindness to a stranger." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in the brilliant colors that Sophia had learned to love. The ranch settled into its evening rhythms around them, the sounds and smells of home surrounding them like an embrace. She thought about the girl she had been, standing alone and terrified on a train platform, convinced her life was over. She could never have imagined then where she would end up, the family she would have, the life she would build. But looking back now, she would not change a single thing. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of uncertainty had led her here, to this porch, with this man, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. She had been abandoned at a train station, broken and lost. Graham had taken her to his ranch and offered her a home. And together, they had created something more beautiful and lasting than either of them could have imagined. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Sophia leaned her head on Graham's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. This was her place. This was her life, and she was grateful for every single day of it. The final years of their lives were peaceful ones, filled with the quiet satisfaction of seeing their children and grandchildren thrive. They celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by 4 generations of family. The ranch house, overflowing with people who owed their existence and their happiness to the chance meeting between a stranded woman and a compassionate cowboy. When Graham passed away at 73, peacefully in his sleep with Sophia beside him, she grieved deeply but without regret. They had been given more than 50 years together, more than many couples could hope for. She held his hand as he took his last breath and whispered her thanks for the life they had shared. Sophia lived another 5 years, remaining active on the ranch and involved in her children's lives. She spent her days gardening, riding when her body allowed, and writing detailed journals about her life for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to read. She wanted them to know her story, to understand how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the greatest blessings. On a summer evening very much like the one when she had first arrived in Arkansas all those decades ago, Sophia sat on the porch and watched the sun set. She felt tired but content, ready for whatever came next. Her last conscious thought was of Graham, of his smile and his kindness and the way he had looked at her that first day on the train platform, as if he already knew she was going to be important to him. When her children found her the next morning, she was still sitting in her chair, a peaceful smile on her face, finally reunited with the man who had given her a home and a life beyond her wildest dreams. They buried her beside Graham on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under the wide Arkansas sky she had learned to love. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own touches while honoring the foundation that Sophia and Graham had built. The story of their meeting, of the abandoned woman and the compassionate cowboy, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of how love can find you in the most unexpected places, how kindness can change the course of a life, and how taking a chance on someone can lead to everything you never knew you wanted. And in the small cemetery on the hillside, 2 headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of Graham Quinn and Sophia Quinn. The inscriptions were simple, just their names and dates, but visitors who knew the story would stand there and smile, understanding that beneath those stones lay 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come. The wind would blow across the prairie grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and earth, and it was easy to imagine that somewhere, somehow, they were still together, still building their dreams, still grateful for the day a train left a woman stranded, and a cowboy said the two simple words that changed everything. "Welcome home."